And after many years of storytelling, I realized there was a stage after that 12 years of storytelling, which is called wisdom making. The making of wisdom that can only come after doing it. So when I asked that question, why does it take so long? And she smiled at me and she said, you'll know. You'll know. That's why this takes so long as well. Because you have to do it. You know, to do all these lines, it's not just like, oh, let me get a little machine to do that for me. Don't want to do that. When you're developing something, I'm sitting here drawing and I'm in the activity. This relaxes, this soothes. It will do a lot of other things too. I'm creating an image, yes, but I'm also in a state of relaxation. I'm exploring. And in the archetypes, which I studied for a number of years, the child archetype is tell me more. I want to know more. Their eyes are wide open. They're looking around them. And that state, it's not a speedy state. It's a state of wonder. In my life, I've met some very interesting people that came particularly from having a studio that was open. People could come and see me and we could chat over a cup of tea, as I'm chatting to you over my cup of tea. And I'm just about to go back to that after 30 years. I'm about to move and go to a place where I will have a studio and a gallery that's mine, and people can come and chat in person. And it won't have it won't have this is what we're going to do today. It's going to have, come and see me. Let's have a chat, have a cup of tea. So that's how I found myself working, really, I think, over the years, that increasingly I was very happy to be creative on the spot. I got a flash goal. Good morning, Jan. If you like this kind of, well, I think they call it vibe, do follow. I'm now doing 3 lives a week in the mornings. It's a selfish reason as well, which is I have book 3 of my 9-book series needs its illustrations, and I've done 4 of them. I've got another 6 or 7 to do, and I thought I'd share those as I made my way, and it would encourage me to get on with them. I've got the copy editor working on it soon. So for those of you who don't know, I'm creating a world called the Realms of Elsewhere, which is probably a reflection of everything I've ever learned. You see how this becomes like textiles. And once it's there, it just grows. And I'm looking at it and going, yeah, I like that. It's interesting. Didn't realize I was going to do that. And that becomes the state of wonder. How dark am I going to make the edges? In the picture, the giant is saving the people. And the first story I ever wrote and learnt, not as a storyteller, but as a performer, which is different, was called The Child Within, about a giant who wanted to kill everything and destroy everything until the child came right up to its face, and everybody was really scared if she was going to die. And it just looked at the giant and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And the giant looked at her and started crying. "I don't know," I don't know. And when I told it as a storytelling, many, 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 many years ago, I was really quite scared because I hadn't really got any knowledge about the development of story. So when that lady said to me, oh, you'll know, it'll take you 12 years, they also call it the 10,000 hours. And all we're saying is, you can't just be a storyteller. You can't just, because you can remember stories, but the whole thing is about empathy, the rising up of the great knowledge which turns into wisdom. And it's the same with artwork. You can't just do it because so many things are employed in the process. Many of them are not conscious. They are unconscious. And they are healing in the process of doing it. I'm sitting here very relaxed, working, developing this area. This is an area in the story. And this little magic fellow is the only real colour in the picture. And I was thinking this morning before I switched on to talk to you, I wonder why I did that. And what am I going to do with that? Because the rest of the picture is this very soft palette of colours. So one of the things I'm working on down here, so all these shapes. So this is the village. And I was working on this. This is the bit where the houses are about to be washed away. So it'll be a small part of the picture, but actually an important part too. Now, let's go back to where I am. So, yeah, it's a very interesting thing, creativity and stories. And the other thing that happens over the hundreds and then thousands of hours is that certain stories begin to sit with you. They become part of you. You go back to them time and time and time again. So I've started to record them as full-blown films for TikTok and for Patreon and YouTube, because they were my learning tool. And what we say in storytelling is, look at the stories that you're attached to, and you get an idea of who you are. What are you attached to? What story are you attached to? And then you begin to look at your issues, your strengths and weaknesses through those narratives. And you're often that saying that people say, what's the story you're telling yourself? So the stories that I became enamored with and are still enamored with often have female protagonists in them. The heroine rather than the hero. And they're also animals that have extraordinary gifts, like the blind boy story. A boy who is lied to because he's blind, cannot see the truth because he cannot see it. So the bird sees for him, saves him from the abuse that's being given to him that he does not know about. And I told it, I was attracted to it and told it and became completely enamored with it. And there are a lot of stories like that. They're big stories. They can take 20, 30, 45 minutes to tell. And you don't do them word for word, because when you do, they die. They've got to stay alive. And to stay alive, you have to be inside the place where it's happening. I think one of the curiosities of the imagination is that these places, these stories, the giant, the bridge, in this instance in front of me, they don't exist anywhere, or do they? If I say to you, there was a queen sitting on a throne. She had been on the throne for many, many years. People said that she knew everything. And she was sitting there on the throne looking out of the window. She was considering what to do next, for she'd been told something that she knew would change her life. Now, in saying that, if there's 20 of you, or 100 of you, or 500 of you sitting listening, you will all see this situation different. The queen, different. The throne, different. And that is the power of it. If I was to describe to you in detail the throne, it would be boring. It is totally unnecessary. Different from writing, let's say. If I just described her crown on her head, that it was made of this or that and tilted that way or this, it could end up just being boring. Whereas if I just say to you, there was this queen sitting on her throne. She was looking out of the window. I haven't told you how close the window is. I haven't told you what this window looks like. It is really important that every single one of you see it the way you need to see it. It becomes a reflection of what you already know. And thereby, this is what I teach, thereby you begin to gain ownership of that story, because you don't have to think, oh, what did he say? Was it a round window? That's not important. The window is right next to her. That's not important. Not unless there's something in the window that she needs to see moving around. What's important is that you are inside your story at that moment. So when I draw the giant in this story, he is a mystery. I don't know his backstory yet, and that's really important. As I'm going down in this corner, I've got this corner in this, yeah, I have. It's going to be darker. I don't know what's going on down there, but I'm going to give this sense of tension. But if I don't know his backstory, and I'm telling his story now, it's a little bit like you meeting a stranger. You're curious. You see somebody in front of you. You've perhaps been introduced via somebody else, and you don't know much about them. It's like old people. I used to go into nursing homes and things, working with people with dementia, or the early onset of dementia, or just being old. And they would come up with the most extraordinary stories that were actually true. There was a woman that I went to see. I used to go to this nursing home. It was about 70 miles away, but they didn't pay very much, but that was fine. It was just a lovely job to do. I would sit there with my kora, my African harp. They'd come and sit around, and for half an hour or an hour, probably an hour, I would tell a collection of stories, and then we'd have a chat. And sometimes I'd tell stories and chat in between, the more I got used to doing it. And one day, I was sitting in this home, and I think there were about a dozen of them, and I just finished my little set, and I'd had such a lovely time. We were sort of chatting. And one of the healthcare visitors said, just wondered if you would mind staying a bit longer. And I said, yeah, of course. Do you want me to do some more stories? No, I want you to go and see one of our new residents. She's been here for about 3 weeks now, but she won't come down. But we found a violin, and it was brought by a niece who didn't know much about her aunt, other than that she used to play the violin. We showed it to her, but she just cried and didn't want anything to do with it. And we can't get her to talk about anything. Would you mind going up to her room and having a chat with her? Perhaps tell her a story. And I said, yeah, of course, why not? That'd be lovely. I'd like that. So I took my Cora up the stairs to where all the bedrooms were, and they all had their own little room, enough space to put their possessions. I went into this room. It wasn't very big, about 10 by 12 maybe, and there was a bed, and the lady was laying flat out on the bed, head on the pillow, but she was basically flat, fully dressed on top of the bed, and there was a couple of nurses in there smiling. They were lovely people, amazing work that they do. And this lady was just laying there looking a bit at the ceiling, and she looked at me and then looked back at the ceiling. I say, I hear you'd like a story. And she said, yes, that would be nice. Please. So I sat at the end of her bed on a chair and played my Cora, my African harp, and told a short story. Interesting enough, I don't really remember what the story was now, because that wasn't what was the important thing. So I tell the story, and then I go into dangerous land, I suppose you could say. Because I said, do you like the sound of the harp? Yes, she said. And the nurses, the 3 of them, had stayed there, sitting down, listening to the story, but watching the situation. Do you like music? Yes, she said. It's very soft. I said, it is. It's why I play it, I think. I do love this Cora. And I have heard there's a photograph being found of you playing a violin. So you used to play a violin, then you'll know how important it is. Those sounds. Yes, she said. It's beautiful. And I said, we had a little bit more of a chat about it. And I said, you know, they've discovered that you have the violin. Do I? Well, it's been brought in. It was found. And they brought it here. Oh. And I wondered why you stopped playing. I said that very nervously as she just sat there, lay there. And she said, I couldn't play anymore. Oh. But the sounds are beautiful. Yes. And I wondered, I was still playing my Cora, I wondered whether you would like to hold your violin, not to play it, of course, but to just have it again. Perhaps we could just lay it on your chest, on your tummy, where you're lying there. Unless you want to sit up. No, I'll stay here. But I'd like that. So the violin, which was in the corner of the room, in a box, was taken out. It wasn't a violin box, violin case. It was a cardboard box. And one of the nurses, the helpers, placed it lengthwise on her tummy as she lay there, and then she put her hands onto it. She felt it. And I was imagining, you know, when you play something You know the shape and the form of this instrument that you play. And I could see her considering it as her hands ran over the wood and then found the strings. And she played a couple of the notes. Of course, the nurses, the helpers, were in bits, I should say, because she smiled. She just smiled. Is that a good sound? Well, it needs a bit of tuning, she said. But yes, it's a good sound. I like that. And I went away considering, what is that about? Perfection. Not having anyone around to talk to about your passion, the thing that was your life. It turned out that she had been a lead violinist for the Birmingham Sinfonia many years ago, and that she had been phenomenal, and then had become old, and unless you knew it, you would have no idea that laying there was somebody struggling with something that she shouldn't struggle with. That once, yet always, she was amazing. That she made a difference. And after that, when I would make my visits, she would come down and she started talking about how she used to play. And I found that incredibly powerful, because it meant that in some way or another her story makes a difference. That we all make a difference. And that we shouldn't forget that when we look, and I can do this as much as anyone else, we see an old person in a supermarket and we have no idea of what they've done in their lives. So one of the connections that I would make with youngsters would say, if you've got an old person in your village, your street, go with your mother or your father if they were young, or if they were teenagers, go and ask them. Go and ask them what they do. You might be surprised. And because it's their life they're going to talk about, it will be energized, and they'll take them back to the moments in their own lives when something powerful happened. A child was born, fell in love, you help somebody, somebody helps you. Big moments in our lives. The people, we're all the same. We have big moments in our lives. Rites of passage, not only rites of passage, but just moments. The best day ever. The film you'll never forget. The forest that was just so amazing on that particular day. The day the snow fell silently, whatever it might be. And these, for a storyteller, become moments of connection with energy and a sense that we all experience the same things, and we, in a situation of emergency, everybody pulls together. All the barriers go down and people pull together, which is probably what needs to happen at the moment in these difficult times. I remember working with some people with dementia, and this lady said she was quite outspoken, so quite different from this other lady. It was a different nursing home. And she said, I remember the war. We're always talking about the war. I remember the war. What do you remember? I said. I remember my mother giving me a gun, telling me to go to the bottom of the garden because they were coming. The Germans were coming. So this is a coastal nursing home. And she'd lived in there all her life in this coastal town up to then. And we all kind of listened to this and thought, wow. And she went quiet again, and then she said, I remember after the war. Can we talk about after the war? And I said, yes, of course we can. The only reason I'm talking about the war is that you're all of a certain age. I know, she said, we're old. Well, I remember I was a nurse. Oh, okay. And after the war, yes, she said. And I used to go in and help these poor people who'd lost limbs and things, and we didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know what to do. And there was a really good doctor there, and he said to me, well, what do you think you could teach them that they could do? Well, I said, I don't know. Some of them can't walk, but I used to be taught by my father archery. Well, why don't you teach a few of them that? And she said, well, so she said, that's what I did. We had a few bows and arrows and some targets, and I began to teach them how to fire an arrow. And they loved it. And then after a while, we introduced table tennis, and that was good. That brought them a lot of fun. And she went on like this for a little while. She said, we made a difference, just like they made a difference, fighting for us. She said, that's a famous thing, that is. All those things that we did. It turned out that she was one of the first nurses who worked at Stoke Mandeville. And that she was one of those nurses who introduced things which were to become eventually the Paralympics. And yet there she was, an old lady with dementia. But the story panned out. She was one of those nurses who introduced hope to young people who'd lost hope. And it became, and I thought, wow, I had no idea. All I thought was she was a bit of a bolshy old lady. But maybe she needed to be bolshy to make a difference. There, look at that. That's cool. So it is important, of course. It's always important. And certainly for me over the many years, that's died on me, that pen. I think I've had it open too long. Over the many years of travelling around, I've met interesting moments. Have I got time to tell you a story? I have. I'm going to tell a very short story. It's a true story, and it's like a double story. So there was a Tsar and a Tsarina. They had a beautiful palace. They had an amazing Tsardom, we might call it. There were vast forests, great lands. The people were content. The Tsar was a good man. His wife was well loved. Life was good. Everything was good. Things grew well. The winters weren't too cold. And one day, the Tsar went out for a walk. This was not unusual. He went out for a walk, and he went into one of his favourite forests, leaving his wife behind, working with some of the maids and some of the men on things to be done. There was some mending to be done on one of the walls of the great palace. Surrounding the palace were not only the forests, but mountains. He would love to go through this forest, and there was a river. He would go down to the river. And when he sat by the river, the Tsar could look up the mountains. There was a kind of a gap between the trees so he could get this real view, and he loved it. And he was sitting there, loving this moment. He could hear the birds singing, and life was good. And then it happened. Oh my, then it happened. There, somebody bellowed. It was so loud, it echoed across the forest. It echoed through the mountains. Everything shook. The birds took off. The Tsar looked up. Somebody was shouting very loudly. And then there was a shaking sound. Everything, the forest, the trees, the leaves, everything started to shake as if somebody, like a monster, was marching towards him, yet he couldn't see anybody. By now, everything had run away. Animals, deer, hares, everything had scurried away. The birds had flown away, and the Tsar was running home through the forest as fast as he could go. The loud shouting had grown louder and louder. The shaking of the forest and the path that he was running on was shaking. It was almost as if his eyes had become blurry because everything was shaking. By now he'd reached the palace. He was running up the stairs. And there was the Tsarina standing there, holding on to a pillar. "Husband," she said, "we wondered where you were. Quickly, come here." "What's happening?" he said. "Come here. Follow me." He followed her up the stairs in the palace. This was a big stairway, huge it was. The palace was shaking. Some of the stone was falling on the ground. "What's going on? Come here, look." And there was a huge window at the top of the stairwell, high up in the palace. "Look," she said, "look. Can you see him?" The Tsar looked. There he could see the mountain. And on the top of the mountain there was a giant. And the giant was shaking his fist. He had a huge hammer in his hand, and every now and again he'd strike the mountain, which made everything shake. And he was bellowing. He was making a challenge. "Send up your champion," he was shouting. "Send him up now. I will fight the champion. I want a battle. Send him up here, and if you don't, I will come down there and I will destroy everything." Quickly, the Tsar got all of his advisors together, all of his warriors together, men and women alike, all the leaders of the armies. He got them together. "What are we going to do?" he said. "What are we going to do?" The advisors gave their advice. It was a giant. It would be impossible. We should send an army. But who was the champion? There must have been a champion. The champion will lead the army. When he looked around, they were all sitting at this huge table. There must have been 40 or 50 of them there. Leaders of the army, the best warriors, etc. So he said, "Which one of you will lead the army? Which one of you?" And they all looked away. They couldn't look him in the eye. They looked at one another. Nobody spoke. The Tsar walked around. Now the Tsarina was sitting at the end of the table watching. "Surely somebody will?" Nobody spoke. A few people coughed, made a few suggestions, but nobody admitted that they were the ones who held the flag, who were the greatest warrior. Nobody. When the Tsar challenged them, they said, "But sire, I'm not well today. I don't know what we can do, and I can't lead an army, not today." "Then," said the Tsar, "I will go." "But, husband, you can't go," said the Tsarina. "You're the leader of all these people. You're the leader of the country. You can't go. One of you can. You must go." But nobody spoke. "I will go," he said. "In fact, I know I am the one that should go. If I don't come back..." How can you come back?" "I want to go and talk to him. Reason with him." But You can't just go unarmed. Then give me my sharpest sword, my strongest shield. But I will go, he said. I will go. So he was given his sharpest sword, his strongest shield. Only then would his wife let him go. But she did not want him to leave. Husband, can I come with you? You cannot. I must now do this on my own. The giant began shouting again, demanding to fight the champion. I will come down there, he bellowed. The whole kingdom, Tsardom, shook as he bellowed louder and louder. Drop the drawbridge, said the Tsar. I will go. The drawbridge was dropped. By now all the people were at the top of the highest part of the palace. They looked down to see the Tsar go across the bridge, leaving the palace in safety. They looked up and could see the giant swinging this great hammer above his head, bellowing for a war. Still, the Tsar walked. He looked up and saw his wife. He looked up and saw so many familiar faces. And then he looked away. And then he began to climb up the hill. Up he went, climbing further and further. It was strange because he reached the forest then. He went through the forest. Every now and again he could see a glint of the hammer swinging in the air. Then nothing again. The bellowing went on, and then it went silent. Up he climbed, until he came out of the forest line, and now he was climbing up the mountain. He looked down at the palace. He could almost see the people, but now they were so far away. Up he went, until at last he reached the top of the mountain. And when he got there, he stopped. He looked around, and then he looked down. And there was the giant, hammer swinging above his head, bellowing. Only he wasn't bellowing, not now. The Tsar put down his sword and shield, got down on his knees, and reached out with his hand, and scooped up the giant in his hand, and held him up to his face, and looked at him as he was shouting, only quietly now, swinging the hammer around his head still. I don't understand, said the Tsar. I thought you were the giant. How can you be this? What is your name? And the giant, still swinging the hammer, said, My name is Fear. Ah, I understand. I see, said the Tsar. And with that, he put his hand on the ground and he watched Fear run away. I understand, he said. And he stood up and he walked home. And he told his wife and the court and the wise people the story. And when they asked what it meant, he said, I realized the closer I got to fear, the smaller it was. Of course, that is why he came to see us. I have learned something. And it was the last story that I had told in an evening of stories, wonder tales, big stories. And a lady was lurking in the shadows as I was packing my things away. And she got a bit closer as I put the last of my cloths and my carpet, packed them and put them to one side and put my instruments in my basket. She said, "Excuse me." "Yes?" "I just wanted to say something about your stories." "Yes?" "I loved that story." "Oh, which one?" I was expecting her to say, the great myth of the girl with the chair on her back who went to the far north. No, none of those. The one about the Tsar and the giant." "Ophir?" "Yes," she said. "That's me." "What do you mean?" I asked. "When I was about 20 years old." "Do you have a moment?" "Yes, of course," I said. "Sit down." "When I was about 20 years old, I went off to college. I was going to be a scientist. I went off to Cambridge. It was exciting times." "Yes?" "My mother became ill. My father had died a few years before, and my mother had become ill. And she wrote me a letter asking me to come home and look after her. We didn't have any money. She couldn't afford a nurse or anything. So I went home to look after her. And I stayed for a year. I put my course back and I stayed for a couple of years. It was 3 or 4 years, I think. And then it was another 5 years before she died. And I lost something. That was so many years ago." "Did you not go back to college?" "No. Something happened. I didn't, and I never did. I was left the house, and I didn't really need too much money. And I became really scared. I didn't understand. And then, a few weeks ago, I did one of those things that I found really scary. I went down to the local shop. I can't go to those supermarkets. Too many people. I went to the shop to get a few things, provisions, some eggs and things. And I saw a poster in the window. It said storytelling about this evening. And I just knew that I had to go. And so I sat in the back and listened to you. And that story's about me. I've been so scared. And I never realized that I could control my fear if I faced it. Well, that's what you did by coming here. Yes, she said. Exactly. And she went away. I never saw her again, but it is interesting how stories silence us and take us somewhere. And it becomes a state of wonder and healing. On an hour. God, I've done an hour. I'm really sorry. I just wanted to tell you that story. So there you are. Start of a week. True story. And a short one to tell. The story of the woman who, true story, who worked at Stoke Mandeville and helped people who'd lost their legs or arms or been hurt mentally in the war, which became the Paralympics, the beginning of the Paralympics, which started at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. Yeah, and the story of the lady, another true story, the lady who couldn't play her violin anymore because she lost the skills through old age, yet it still made her smile. True stories.